Chapter 1. The Bite in the Void. Kael Voren wasn't the type to wax poetic about the stars. To him, they were just cold, distant pinpricks of light that didn't care if he made it through his next delivery or not. And he liked it that way, silent, judgmental, free, demanding nothing but that he keep his rickety ship, the stellar drift, gliding through the void. At 32, Kael had spent nearly half his life in cramped cockpits, hauling cargo from one station to another, living a life nobody noticed. He didn't mind. Solitude had its price, but that price was freedom. Today, he was drifting through the Trius Void, a dark stretch of space between systems where comm signals faltered and pirates lurked like vultures over a corpse. The stellar drift, a beat-up freighter with a scratched hull and an engine that groaned like an old man with arthritis, was his home. Home, if you could call a duct-tape pilot's chair, a life support system that hissed oddly, and a cargo bay reeking of synthetic resin a home. Kael leaned back in his seat, tapping a rhythm on the console, staring at the empty radar screen. 4 months out from Earth, and he was starting to crave a decent sandwich, something that wasn't the dry, packaged slop he'd been surviving on for weeks. Just get this load delivered, and I'll take a day off, he muttered to himself, voice rough from disuse. Maybe grab a beef sandwich at Pharaoh's station. Or two, he smirked, imagining the smell of grilled meat instead of the stale oil scent of his ship. Kael wasn't much for daydreaming, but sometimes he let himself drift into small comforts like that. It kept him sane. He just closed his eyes, about to doze off, when the console let out a shrill beep. Kael jolted, nearly knocking over the lukewarm water cup beside him. What the hell? He growled. Sitting up, the radar blinked, showing a small object less than a kilometer away. A life pod, floating dead in the starry expanse. No SOS, no life signs, just a faint blip in the dark. Kael frowned, rubbing his scruffy chin. Where'd you come from? He said, as if it might answer. He hit the comms button, trying a hail. This is Stellar Drift. Anyone in that life pod? Report status. Static crackled back. He shrugged. It could be an empty wreck. But space law demanded a check, and honestly, he was curious. It had been too long since he'd seen anyone but lifeless delivery drones. All right, good Samaritan time, he told himself, nudging the thrusters to pull alongside. The exterior cameras beamed an image onto his screen, a battered metal pod, scorched and pocked with holes, like it had been chewed up in a fight and spat out. Kael flicked on the floodlights, white beams sweeping over its rusted shell. No sign of a mothership or rescue team. Probably abandoned, he murmured, engaging the docking clamps. With a dry clank, the stellar drift latched on, and the airlock hissed open. Kael suited up in a pressure jacket, an old thing that smelled of burnt rubber, and crossed the hatch. He wasn't expecting much, maybe an unconscious pilot. Or worse, a corpse. But when the pod's door slid open, he found darkness and silence. No people, no breathing, just his boots clanging on the metal floor. Hello? He called, voice echoing. Nothing replied. Then he heard it, a faint hiss, like wind through a crack, but sharper. Kael switched on his shoulder lamp, sweeping light around the pod. In the far corner, something moved, fast, small, and with too many legs. He squinted. A spider-like creature, the size of his fist, with needle-thin mandibles and a body shimmering purple, skittered across the deck. Oh, hell no, Kael said, stepping back, hand fumbling for the stun baton clipped to his belt. The thing hissed, then launched itself at him with terrifying speed. No, 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 stay back, Kael yelled, flailing, but it was too late. It latched onto his forearm, mandibles piercing through the jacket. A searing pain erupted, like fire racing up his arm. Kael roared, slamming his arm against the wall. The creature dropped off, staggering, then twitched a few times before going still. Kael panted, staring at his arm. Blood dripped through the torn fabric, mixing with a strange purple fluid from the bite. Damn it, he hissed through gritted teeth. Stumbling upright, his head spun, his body flushed with heat. He kicked the dead thing aside, shining his light on it. It didn't look like any bug he knew, not quite an insect. Not quite an animal, more like something alien. You'd better not be poisonous, he muttered. though he knew it was wishful thinking. He stumbled back to the stellar drift, sealing the hatch behind him. Lock that pod down, he ordered the system, voice shaky. Vent it if you have to. We've got a problem. The heat in his body surged, disorienting, but he heard a final hiss from the creature, like it had died as the air sucked out. Kael dragged himself to the ship's tiny med bay, grabbing the scanner from the toolkit. It beeped as it ran over his arm, screen flashing gibberish about unidentified proteins in his blood. Thanks for nothing, he snapped, tossing it aside. He washed the bite with antiseptic, bandaged it, then collapsed onto the bunk. His arm throbbed, but the feverish heat began to fade, replaced by an odd sensation, like something shifting inside him. He stared at the bandage, now stained with a faint purple streak. Just a bad day, he told himself, forcing a laugh. Tomorrow'll be fine. But deep down, he knew something was off. He lay back, closing his eyes, hoping sleep would drown the unease. He didn't realize that, out in the Trius Void's darkness, something had started ticking in his blood, a pulse the galaxy would soon feel. Here's Chapter 2. An unwanted pull of the pulse of the void. Written in English with a length of approximately 1.300 words. This chapter continues Kael Voren's journey as he discovers the bizarre effects of the alien parasite bite. I've kept the tone natural, with casual dialogue and a mix of humor and unease, staying true to the story you've enjoyed so far. Chapter 2. An unwanted pull. Kael Voren woke up feeling like he'd been hit by a freighter. His head throbbed in pulses. His throat was parched, and the arm where that damn bug bit him ached under a crusty bandage. He staggered out of the narrow bunk aboard the stellar drift, catching his reflection in the scratched mirror on the wall. Bloodshot eyes, hair a tangled mess, but otherwise normal. No oozing sores or feverish sweats. Maybe I overreacted, he rasped, rubbing his face. Just a dumb space bug. He grabbed the med scanner again, hoping for clarity, but the outdated device only blinked back nonsense, unidentified proteins detected, and anomalous readings. Kael snorted, chucking it into a corner. He wasn't a doctor, and the stellar drift sure as hell wasn't a lab. If I'm still breathing by Pharos station, that's good enough, he muttered, slumping into the pilot's chair. He punched in coordinates, and the ship rattled as its engines kicked on. Another day, another delivery, everything would be fine. Pharos station was a bustling trade hub, a hulking steel beast floating among the stars, packed with pilots, merchants, and surly mercenaries. Kael guided the stellar drift into dock, feeling the familiar jolt as the clamps locked in. He hadn't seen a real person in almost 2 months, just drones handling pickups and payments over the net. Today, he decided to stretch his legs, drop off the cargo in person, and maybe grab something hot to eat. Beef, here I come, he said, patting his stomach as he stepped out. The station's air hit him like a wall, thick with oil and sweat, but to Kael, it was a paradise compared to the stale confines of his ship. He hefted a small crate onto his shoulder and headed for the receiving desk. A young woman in a gray uniform stood there, tapping at a console, barely looking up. Name? She asked, voice flat. Kael Voren, cargo pilot, he replied, setting the crate down, dropping off 15 rolls of nanofiber from Oris station. She glanced up, and that's when Kael noticed something off. Her eyes widened, her cheeks flushed, and she blinked like she'd just seen a ghost. You, she stammered, hands trembling over the console. You're dropping off here? Kael frowned. Yeah, that's right. Something wrong? He glanced down at his jacket, old, a bit grimy, but nothing outrageous. She smiled, a shy but dazzling grin that felt way too intense. No, nothing. It's just, you look really great. She ducked her head, hair falling over her face, then popped back up like a spring. Are you single? Kael froze, jaw-dropping. What? He let out a nervous laugh, thinking it was a joke. You okay? I just need to sign off. But she didn't laugh. She leaned over the desk, eyes sparkling, brushing his hand with hers. I mean it. Do you, wanna grab a drink? After my shift? Kael yanked his hand back, feeling a weird heat crawl up his spine. Thanks. But I gotta go. He scribbled his signature, shoved the crate toward her. and turned away. She called after him, voice almost pleading. Wait, I'm Mina. See you around? Kael picked up his pace. Heart pounding. What the hell was that? He muttered under his breath. He wasn't the type women swooned over, he knew that. His handful of dates back on Earth had been awkward fumbles or dead-end silences. Yet Mina had stared at him like he was the galaxy's last hope. He shook it off, aiming for the food court. But as he crossed a hallway, a tall female guard in light armor blocked his path. Hey, who are you? She asked. Tone sharp. Kael opened his mouth to answer. But she tilted her head, cheeks reddening, her gaze softening. I mean, you look kinda hot. Wanna grab dinner? Kael stepped back, hands up. You messing with me? I'm not. She cut him off, closing the gap. I'm not kidding. There's something about you. I can't explain it. Come with me, please? Her voice turned desperate, and Kael felt a chill. He mumbled an excuse and bolted past her, leaving her standing there, dazed. At the food court, he slid into a corner booth, trying to calm down. Must be a full moon or something, he told himself, ordering a plate of grilled meat. But when the waitress brought it, she wasn't normal either. She set the plate down, hands shaky, then lingered, staring with her mouth half open. You need anything else? She asked, voice syrupy. Water? Or me? Kael nearly choked. No, I'm good, thanks. He buried his face in the food, avoiding her gaze. Then he heard whispers nearby. A group of women at the next table glanced his way, giggling and murmuring. One stood up, sauntering over. Sorry, just had to say, you're really something. She said, blushing. Mind if I join you? No. Kael shot up, knocking his chair over. He ran out of the food court, pulse racing. The halls were busier now, and every woman he passed turned to look. Some flushed, some smiled, a few even called out, Hey, handsome, wait up. It felt like a hunt, and he was the prey. Kael sprinted back to the stellar drift, slamming the door shut and locking it tight. He leaned against the wall, panting, clutching his chest. What's happening? He yelled into the empty ship. Then he glanced at his arm. The bite, the purple mark was fainter, but still there. He thought of the creature, the heat that had surged through him. The scanner's data. No way, he whispered. That bug, did it do this? He grabbed the scanner, forcing it to run again. The screen flickered. Elevated foreign proteins. Abnormal pheromone signal. Kael dropped it, hands shaking. Pheromones? So I'm what, a walking cologne now? He laughed. A dry, hollow sound. But it died fast as reality sank in. Every woman on the station was drawn to him, unnaturally, uncontrollably. Kael slumped into the pilot's chair, staring out at the dark void. He wanted to laugh it off, but a heavy dread settled in his chest. If this was real, he didn't want it. He didn't want anyone looking at him like that, like he wasn't human. I've got to fix this, he murmured, setting new coordinates. Oris Medical Station, the only place he knew might help. But deep down, he had a bad feeling. This trip wouldn't be simple. Chapter 3. Reluctant Alley. Kael Voren never imagined he'd be hiding in his own ship's cargo hold to escape a mob of women. But here he was, crouched among crates of nanofiber and a box of rusty spare parts, listening to insistent banging on the stellar drift's hatch. Kael, come out, please, a voice called, brimming with excitement. I baked cookies. Want some? Another chimed in. He groaned, clutching his head. What's wrong with you people? He'd flown to Oris Medical Station hoping to find someone, a doctor, a scientist, anyone, who could explain what was happening to his body. But the moment he'd landed and stepped out, chaos erupted. A female ship tech dropped her wrench and rushed over to ask him for coffee. A pack of nurses passing by stopped dead, whispering and flashing smiles that belonged in cheesy romance vids. Kael had bolted back to his ship, locked the door, and now he was trapped. Okay, calm down, he muttered, taking a deep breath. I just need to get out there, find a scientist, and fix this mess. He glanced at the bite on his arm. The purple mark was still there, a nagging reminder of that alien bug. He stood, brushed his hair back, and cracked the hatch open. Sorry, I'm busy, he shouted, darting through the crowd. Their calls echoed behind him, but he didn't look back. Oris was a sterile white maze of gleaming corridors and antiseptic smells. Kael wove through the bustle, dodging anyone in a skirt or with long hair. He aimed for the xenobiology wing, where he'd heard experts studied alien life. But before he reached the entrance, a figure stepped into his path. "You're Kael Voren, right?" The voice was low, cool, and lacked any hint of swooning. Kael looked up to see a tall woman in sleek black armor, holding a small plasma pistol. Her short brown hair hugged her scalp, and a scar sliced across her left cheek, giving her the look of someone who just walked off a battlefield. She eyed him, gaze narrowing, unflinching. "Yeah, that's me," Kael said, stepping back. "Who are you? And, you're not about to ask me out, are you?" She smirked, a humorless twist of her lips. "Name's Tara Klyne, and no, I'm not here to date you. I'm here to grab you." She tapped the pistol against her thigh, like she was debating whether to use it. "Someone's paying good money for you. Word is you're some kind of freak show." Kael swallowed. "Hands up. Look, I don't know what you've heard, but I'm not for sale. I just want to fix." He gestured at his arm. "This. Can you help me?" Tara tilted her head, sizing him up. "Fix what? You look normal to me. Rumors say you make women lose their minds just by breathing. I don't see anything special." She stepped closer, pressing the pistol to his chest. "But cash is cash. Move it, or I make this messy." Kael winced, keeping his voice steady. "You don't feel anything? No, urge to hug me or something?" He half joked, testing her. Tara frowned, pulling back slightly, then let out a dry laugh. "You nuts? I don't have time to crush on random guys." She pointed at a small device clipped to her collar. "This blocks pheromones. I hunt bounties, not boyfriends." She shoved him forward. "Let's go." "Wait." Kael pulled away, voice urgent. "If you're not affected, you could help me. I got bit by some alien bug, and now everyone's acting like I'm a love god. I don't want this. I just want to be normal again." Tara paused, staring at him. "Alien bug?" She raised an eyebrow, like she was weighing if he was full of it. "You serious? Why would I make this up?" Kael snapped. "You think I enjoy being chased like this? I can barely leave my ship." She went quiet for a second, then holstered her gun. "All right, spill it. If it's real, I might switch gears. But if you're lying, I'll shoot your head off before I cash you in." Kael exhaled, slumping onto a nearby bench. He gave her the quick rundown, the life pod, the weird creature, the bite, and how women on Pharos and here went crazy around him. Tara listened, arms crossed, nodding now and then. When he finished, she whistled. "That's wild. So you're a walking magnet. Kinda funny, actually." "Funny my ass," Kael grumbled. "Try being the one running from it." Tara shrugged. "I've been chased for bounties, so it's not that different. But fine, I'll buy it, for now. If this is legit, I might make more digging into it than selling you." She smirked. "Partners?" Kael blinked. "Partners? You just held a gun to me." "Yeah, so?" Tara said, unfazed. "I changed my mind. I know a place, Zethra. Heard stories about it getting hit by bugs like yours centuries ago. Might find some answers." Kael rubbed his chin, thinking. He didn't fully trust Tara. She looked like the type to ditch him for a bigger paycheck. But he was out of options. "Deal," he said, "but if you're planning to turn me in, at least give me a heads up so I can bolt." Tara chuckled. "Fair enough, but don't screw this up." "Kael, I hate cleaning up messes." She clapped his shoulder, then turned away. "Come on, back to your ship. I don't want those ladies out there glaring at me like I stole their boyfriend." Kael stood, glancing down the hall. A cluster of women was heading his way, eyes gleaming when they spotted him. Yeah, let's move," he urged Tara, sprinting for the stellar drift. Tara followed, muttering something about, "Why did I sign up for this?" Once the hatch slammed shut, Kael dropped into the pilot's seat, punching in Zethra's coordinates. He looked at Tara, now fiddling with her pistol in the corner. "You sure you're in this to help me?" he asked, skeptical. Tara glanced up, smirking. "Sure, nah, but I like money, and this sounds like it could pay off. Just fly, lover boy." Kael shook his head, firing up the engines. "If I survive this, I'm never cracking open another life pod." He mumbled. The stellar drift shuddered, launching into space. carrying Kael and his reluctant new ally toward a planet he hoped wouldn't hold more bugs waiting to ruin his life. Chapter 4. Secrets Beneath the Toxins. Kael Voren had never smelled anything as bad as Zethra's air. When the stellar drift touched down on a soggy patch of swamp, the hatch slid open, and a wave of sulfur and rot hit him so hard he nearly gagged. Holy hell, what is this? He choked, clamping a hand over his nose. Before him stretched a murky planet shrouded in yellow fog, twisted trees rising from black water, and the incessant chirping of oversized insects echoing everywhere. Tara Klyne stepped out behind him, a small gas filter mask clipped to her face, her voice muffled but calm. Welcome to Zethra, the galaxy's trash heap. Don't breathe too deep, you'll pass out. She patted his shoulder and hopped into the muck, her heavy boots sinking halfway. Let's move, Dreamboat, we've got stuff to find. Kael grimaced, wrapping an old rag around his nose and mouth. You sure this place has answers? I don't want to die choking on poison just to find out it's a bust. He followed Tara, clutching the ship's only decent enviro scanner tight. 70% sure, Tara replied, tossing a glance over her shoulder. Heard some smugglers talk about Zethra once. Couple centuries back, it got hit by something like your bug. People went nuts, then dropped dead. If there's a lead on that thing in you, it's here. She paused, pointing at a jagged pile of rocks in the distance. See that? Old ruins. Let's go. Kael sighed, wading through knee-deep black water. 70% isn't sure. Tara, if I croak here, I'm haunting you. Tara let out a dry laugh but kept moving, and he trailed behind, muttering about how he should have stayed on Pharos eating beef. An hour of slogging through mud later, Kael's legs ached, and he started spotting weird shapes in the fog, giant insects buzzing past, leaving a creepy hum in their wake. He raised the scanner, its screen flashing warnings about airborne toxins. Tara, this says the air can kill us in 6 hours. How long we got? You worry too much. Tara shot back, unfazed. I've survived worse. Just don't fall in the water. That's where the real poison'll melt you like ice cream. She pointed at a stone entrance half submerged in mud. There, old library, or something like it. Kael eyed the opening, a crumbling stone door coated in moss and dead vines. Looks more like a tomb, he said, but followed as Tara shoved it open. Inside was a dark corridor, lit only by Tara's shoulder lamp bouncing off walls slick with thin ice. Kael waved his scanner, checking for life signs. Nothing alive here. Been abandoned forever. Probably. Good, Tara said, pushing deeper. No one alive means no one to fight over whatever we dig up. She led him down a rickety staircase to a wide chamber lined with stone shelves, stacked with metallic scrolls, ancient logs preserved by some tech Kael couldn't wrap his head around. He grabbed one, unrolling it to reveal scribbled text in an alien script. Tara, you read this? He asked, handing it over. Tara glanced at it, shaking her head. Nope, but I've got this. She pulled a small translator gadget from her pocket. Scanning the scroll, the screen lit up, spitting out lines in English. Kael read aloud. Day 472. Vyris era. The parasite spreads. Men and women alike lose control. Driven mad, we built it to manage populations. But it's turned on us. He stopped, heart pounding. Hold up. Built it? You mean this bug wasn't natural? He stared at Tara, wide-eyed. You hearing this? It's a weapon. Tara nodded, not even surprised. Vyris, an old civilization. Collapsed 1,000 years back. Heard they messed with bio stuff. Looks like you're the late victim of their little experiment. She scanned another scroll, reading on. We crafted a device to reverse it. Hidden on Glacora, north of the galaxy. Without it, the parasite evolves. Grows stronger. Evolves? Kael muttered, hand drifting to the bite. So this could get worse? I'm already sick of running from people. He turned to Tara. What do you think? Glacora real? You asking me like I'm a tour guide? Tara smirked. But yeah, I know Glacora, ice planet. Freezes your skin off. If it's true, that device is your shot. She pocketed the translator. Let's grab this and get out before. A sharp screech cut her off. Kael spun around, spotting a massive shape crawling from the shadows, a bug-like thing. Dog-sized, with razor mandibles and glowing red eyes. "Tara," he yelled, stumbling back. "What the hell's that?" "Uninvited guest," Tara snapped, drawing her plasma pistol. She fired, a blue bolt streaking out. But the creature dodged, lunging at them. Kael tripped, crashing into a shelf. "Get up," Tara barked, firing again. The bug screeched. Undeterred, Kael scrambled to his feet, grabbing a broken stone chunk. He hurled it, smacking the creature's head and throwing it off balance. Tara landed a shot square in its chest, and it collapsed, twitching before going still. Kael panted, staring at her. "You okay?" "Yeah. And you're shaking like a leaf," Tara replied, holstering her gun. "Let's move before its buddies show up." She yanked him toward the exit, but more screeches echoed, louder. Closer. They bolted through the corridor, mud splashing underfoot. At the door, Tara shoved Kael out, then slammed it shut behind them. The screeches muffled, but he knew the bugs wouldn't stay trapped long. "You just saved me," he said, catching his breath. "Don't get all teary," Tara shot back, wiping sweat off her brow. "I need you alive to cash in." But her eyes softened for a split second, and Kael caught it. She wasn't as cold as she played. They trudged back to the stellar drift, scrolls and translator in tow. Once the hatch closed, Kael flopped into the pilot's seat, glancing at Tara. "Glakora, huh? You sure you're up for this?" Tara leaned against the wall, shrugging. "You want to live with that thing in you forever? I'm not babysitting you through more bug attacks. Fly, Kael, I'm catching a nap. Don't wake me for critters." Kael chuckled dryly, setting the course for Glakora. "No promises," he mumbled. The stellar drift shuddered, lifting off into space, leaving Zethra and its toxic secrets behind. But Kael couldn't shake the thought. If the parasite was evolving, what would he do? He glanced at the bite, now nearly faded, and felt a shiver. This journey was far from over. Chapter 5. Ice and Truth. Glakora was so cold Kael Voren swore his nose was about to snap off. As the stellar drift punched through the planet's thick, swirling clouds, he peered out the cockpit window at a blinding white expanse, snow falling in sheets. Jagged ice peaks clawing the sky, and wind howling like it wanted to rip the ship apart. "Tara, you sure this is the place?" he asked, breath fogging in the chilly cabin. "Looks more like a graveyard than somewhere with a cure." Tara Klyne, slouched beside him in her armor jacket and a scarf around her neck, shot him a sidelong glance. "You keep asking me like I've got a map of the universe in my pocket," she said, voice nasal from the cold. "The Zethra logs said the device is here. So we look. If it's not, at least you'll freeze staring at something pretty." She smirked, but Kael wasn't amused. He guided the ship down to a flat stretch between two ice mountains. The engines whined, then fell silent as the stellar drift settled with a soft jolt. Kael layered on a thick coat, hands trembling as he zipped it up. "If I die out there, Tara, I'm haunting you," he muttered, stepping into the biting wind. The cold hit like a punch, slicing through his layers. Kael yanked his hood down, clutching the enviro scanner that was half dead from the temperature. Tara led the way, a red signal lamp cutting through the blizzard. "Anything yet?" he yelled over the gale. "There," Tara pointed at a faint shape ahead, a metallic structure half buried in ice. Its curved lines alien and unfamiliar. "Vyris ruins," she said, voice firm. "Move it." They trudged through knee-deep snow, each step a slog. Up close, the structure revealed a massive metal door etched with swirling patterns. Tara banged on it, then pried it open with a metal bar from her pack. It creaked wide, exposing a pitch-black hallway. "You're good at breaking stuff," Kael said, following her inside. The air was still frigid but less brutal, thick with the scent of old metal. The corridor stretched into a circular chamber, a tall pedestal at its center holding a cylindrical device that glowed a faint blue. "That's it," Tara said, striding forward. "Look like your fix?" Kael approached, running a hand over its icy surface. "Maybe. How'd I turn it on?" He tapped it, jumping as a deep, mechanical voice echoed through the room. "Living entity detected. State your purpose." "Goddamn." Kael stumbled back, nearly tripping. "What's that?" Tara said, calm as ever. "Real old. Talk to it." "Kael." She crossed her arms, stepping aside. Kael cleared his throat, steadying himself. Hi, I'm Kael Voren. I got bit by a bug, a virus parasite. It's making people, like me too much. Can you help? The device pulsed. The voice replying. Confirmed. Virus retrovirus type 7. Engineered for behavioral control via pheromones. IMCUSTODIAN 9. Guardian of this technology. This unit can reverse the process. But the parasite in you has evolved. Full removal risks termination. Termination? Kael spun to Tara. You hear that? It says I could die. Tara shrugged. You want to keep that thing in you forever? Your call. I'm not forcing you. Before Kael could answer, an explosion rocked the entrance. Smoke billowing in. He whirled around as black-robed figures stormed through. Energy rifles blazing. Freeze. A woman's voice barked. The leader, a tall, gaunt figure with silver hair tied tight, advanced. We're the Vyris Council. You've got what we want. Kael Voren. Kael backed up, hands raised. You know me? I don't have anything but trouble. Don't play dumb, she snapped, eyes icy. The retrovirus in you is our legacy. We'll take it, refine it, and rule the galaxy with it. Grab him. Tara fired a shot into the ceiling. Ice chunks crashing down. Over my dead body, she growled, yanking Kael behind the pedestal. The council returned fire, and Kael ducked, heart hammering. Tara, what are you doing? We're toast. Shut up and find a way out. Tara snapped, shooting back. A plasma bolt grazed her shoulder, knocking her down. Kael yelled, lunging to help, but the council swarmed in. A masked figure clubbed his head, and everything went black. Kael came to in a cell on a strange ship, wrists bound by energy cuffs. Head pounding. Tara was gone. The silver-haired woman loomed over him, holding a syringe of purple liquid. Welcome to your future, Kael, she said. You'll help us reclaim what's ours. You're insane, Kael snarled, straining against the cuffs. I'm not your weapon. You don't get a say, she replied, raising the syringe. But Kael's mind flashed to Tara. She'd saved him on Zethra, and now she might be dead because of him. He grit his teeth, searching for an escape, but the cuffs tightened. Meanwhile, back on Glacora, Tara lay under rubble in the ruins, blood seeping from her shoulder. She gasped, fumbling for a comm device in her pocket. Damn it, Kael, she rasped, pressing the button. Need backup? The weak signal flickered out into space. A desperate plea for anyone listening. Kael didn't know Tara was alive. All he knew was he'd landed in a bigger nightmare. And if he didn't break free, the galaxy might pay for it. He glared at the bite on his arm, itching again, and whispered, "You've caused enough trouble." Chapter 6. Rescue and Lira. Kael Voren woke with a throat so dry it felt like sandpaper and a dull ache radiating through his body. He was sprawled on the cold metal floor of a holding cell, wrists still bound by glowing energy cuffs, the dim light overhead forcing him to squint. Beyond the walls, the steady hum of a ship's engines rumbled, and he caught snippets of voices, Vyris Council members. He figured, prep the sample. One said, retrovirus needs reactivation before we hit Valith. Valith? Kael mumbled, dragging himself upright. He thought of Tara, last he'd seen. She'd gone down in the Glacora ruins, and he had no clue if she'd made it. Damn it, he whispered, slamming a fist against the floor. I've got to get out of here. He glanced at the bite on his arm, the purple mark darker now. Prickling like something alive was squirming inside. You're not winning this, he growled at it, as if the parasite could hear him. The cell door slid open, and the silver-haired woman stepped in, syringe of purple liquid in hand. Awake, are you? She said, voice icy. Good, we need you alert for the tests. Tests for what? Kael asked, scooting back against the wall. I'm not your lab rat. You're better than that, she replied, advancing. The retrovirus in you is the key to rebuilding the virus legacy. Once we perfect it, every being in the galaxy will kneel to us. She raised the syringe, the purple glinting under the light. Kael clenched his jaw, tugging at the cuffs. You're out of your mind. He spat. You think I'll let you turn me into a weapon? You don't have a choice, she said, but before the needle could touch his skin, a deafening explosion shook the ship. She stumbled, the syringe clattering to the floor. What's that? she snapped. Rushing out. Kael exhaled, heart racing. He heard plasma fire and shouts through the walls, attack. Secure the sample, someone yelled. He didn't know what was happening. But it was his only shot. He bent down, trying to gnaw at the cuffs with his teeth, only managing to hurt his jaw. Then the door burst open again, this time. Tara Klyne staggered in, blood crusted on her shoulder. Plasma pistol still smoking in her hand. Tara, Kael shouted, eyes lighting up. You're alive. Yeah, sorry to disappoint you. Tara rasped, voice rough. She knelt, slicing the cuffs with an energy knife. Get up, we're short on time. How did you? Kael started. But Tara cut him off. Not now, she said, hauling him to his feet. Got help. Let's move. She dragged him into the hallway, where smoke and plasma bolts filled the air. Council guards fired at a sleek ship hovering outside a viewport, its cannons blasting back. Who's helping you? Kael asked, ducking as a bolt whizzed past. Lira Valtor, Tara replied, shoving him down as a guard charged. She shot the guy down, then pulled Kael along. Pilot I pinged with an emergency signal. She's good, bit crazy. Though. They raced to an escape hatch, a cable dangling to Lira's ship. Tara grabbed it, motioning Kael. Go. He clutched the line, sliding down, icy space wind whipping his face. He hit the deck of the new ship hard, sprawling, and a small hand yanked him up. Hi, I'm Lira, a bright but rushed voice said. Kael looked up at a woman about 27, short black hair, in a silver pilot suit. She grinned, but her eyes flickered when they met his. You're Kael, right? Heard you're, pretty famous. Kael winced. Don't bring that up, he said, standing. Thanks for the save. No problem, Lira replied, darting to the controls. But we're not clear yet, strap in. She yanked a lever, and the ship rocketed forward, dodging a barrage from the council vessel. Tara collapsed beside Kael, panting, clutching her wounded shoulder. You okay? Kael asked, worried. I'll live, Tara grunted, smirking. Ask me again, and I'll toss you out the airlock. Lira spun back, still piloting. They're on us. Tara, take the turret. Tara staggered up, manning the guns and firing back. Kael peered out the viewport, seeing the council ship tailing them, its cannons lighting up the void. Lira, you know about me? Kael asked, voice low. Yeah, Tara filled me in over the signal. Lira said, eyes on the controls. Something's got women going nuts around you. Right? Lucky me. I'm not feeling it, right now. Anyway, she blushed, shaking her head. I mean, I'm fine. Focus on flying. Kael frowned. Right now? What's that mean? Nothing. Lira yelped, voice pitching up. Tara, hit him harder. Tara landed a shot on the council ship's engine, making it wobble, but it kept coming. Kael gripped his seat, studying Lira. She was trying to act normal, but her hands shook slightly. You're feeling it, aren't you? He asked. Quieter. The thing in me. Lira bit her lip, then glanced at him for a second. Maybe a little, she admitted, but I'm not letting it win. I'm here 'cause Tara called. Not 'cause of that. She turned away, cheeks pink. Kael sighed, guilt bubbling up. I don't want anyone fighting themselves just to talk to me. He said, thanks. Lira, seriously. Don't get mushy. Tara cut in from the turret. She's here 'cause I paid her. Right, Lira? Yup, totally. Lira said fast, but her smile faltered. The ship jolted as a cannon hit grazed it, and she growled, hang on, I'm shaking these guys. She veered through a cosmic dust cloud, losing the council ship for a moment. When the chaos settled, Kael looked at the two women who'd pulled him out. Tara, tough but clearly caring more than she let on. Lira, upbeat but wrestling with herself. Where to now? He asked. Valith, Tara said, slumping back. The council mentioned it. If there's a real fix for you, it's there. Valith's a swamp, Lira added, sounding tired. Been there fixing ships. Hot, stinky, full of bugs. Excited yet? Thrilled, Kael said, laughing weakly. Ice to mud. But if it ends this, I'm in. He glanced at Lira, catching her steal a look before snapping away. Lira, if you need a break, just say, I don't want you pushing too hard. Pushing what? She shot back, voice shrill. I'm good. Sit tight. but her eyes betrayed a flicker of confusion. And Kael knew she wasn't entirely honest. Tara nudged him. "You're making her blush already," she whispered, smirking. "Watch it, Galaxy's sweetheart." Kael shook his head, staring out at the black expanse. He'd escaped the council, but the parasite lingered, and now Lira was caught in its pull. He clenched his fists, resolve hardening. Valith, here I come. Chapter 7. Swamp and Rebirth. Valith was a steaming, soggy hellhole Kael Voren never wanted to visit again. When Lira's ship touched down on a muddy outcrop in the swamp, vapor rose from the ground like the breath of some sleeping beast. The air reeked of sulfur and rotting plants, and the constant buzz of insects drilled into his skull. Kael stepped out, sweat breaking out instantly, his shirt sticking to his skin. "I'd rather freeze back on Glacora than deal with this," he muttered, wiping his brow. Lira Valtor hopped down beside him, gripping a short-barreled pistol, her black hair plastered to her cheeks with dampness. "You say that, but you're still kicking," she replied, flashing a grin. "Quit complaining, we've got work to do." She flicked her eyes at him, then turned away fast, like she was dodging something in his gaze. Tara Klyne emerged last, her shoulders still bandaged from Glacora but showing no sign of pain. "Valith's no vacation spot," she said, voice steady. "The council mentioned it, so the fix for you's here. Let's move before they catch up." She raised her scanner, pointing toward a hazy shape in the fog, a crumbling stone structure peeking through gnarled trees. Kael nodded, though his legs wobbled. The bite on his arm itched fiercely now, like the parasite sensed its end was near. "If I die here, you two better put up a gravestone," he said, half joking. Tara rolled her eyes, and Lira let out a small laugh. They waded through the swamp, black water lapping at their thighs, tiny critters darting around their legs. Kael held his lamp high, cutting through the mist, trying not to imagine what might grab him from below. "Tara, you sure the council doesn't know we're here?" he asked, keeping his voice low. "Not sure," Tara replied, hand tight on her pistol. "But if they show, I'm shooting first, asking later. You focus on finding that machine." After an hour of battling mud and bugs, they reached the ruins, a massive stone edifice draped in moss and vines. Its door etched with the same Vyris swirls from Glacora. Lira shoved it open with her shoulder, the hinges groaning. "I'll take point," she said, stepping in. Kael and Tara followed, the air inside thick and stifling. The hallway opened into a wide chamber, a stone pedestal at its center cradling a hexagonal device that shimmered with a faint purple glow. "There it is," Kael said, moving closer. He touched it, and an AI voice rumbled. "Confirmed. Virus retrovirus type 7 detected. Unit primed for DNA restructuring. Warning. Process may be fatal." "Fatal?" Kael turned to Tara and Lira, again with the "might die" crap. "I'm getting real tired of that word." Lira stepped up, resting a hand on his shoulder. "You don't have to do it if you're not ready," she said, softer than usual. "But if you don't, the council will snag you again." We don't want that." Kael met her eyes, catching a flicker of something unsteady. "You're still feeling it, aren't you?" he asked, voice low. "The thing in me." Lira bit her lip, nodding slightly. "A bit, but I'm handling it. I'm here for you, not it." She looked away, cheeks flushing. Tara crossed her arms, smirking. "You two done with the heart-to-heart? Decide." "Kael, I'm not standing around all day." Kael took a deep breath, nodding. "All right, let's do it." He pressed a button on the device, and it hummed to life. Purple light flaring, a beam shot into his chest, and he screamed, collapsing as pain tore through him, like fire in every cell. He heard Lira call his name, but it faded into a haze. Then an explosion shattered the moment. Kael's eyes snapped open, smoke flooding the room. The Vyris Council, black-robed figures, burst in, guns blazing. Tara yelled, "Behind me!" She returned fire, dragging Kael and Lira behind the pedestal. "We're ambushed," Lira shouted, landing a shot in a guard's shoulder. "Kael, you okay?" "Not dead yet," Kael gasped, clenching his teeth. The energy still coursed through him. "Unfinished. Cover me, almost there." Tara roared, dropping two more guards, but a plasma bolt hit her leg, sending her down. Son of a. She cursed. Crawling back, Lira leapt forward, shielding Tara, firing wildly. Kael, hurry, she barked. He gripped the pedestal, forcing himself up. The device whined louder, light enveloping him. The pain doubled, but he gritted out. Finish it. A blinding flash erupted, and he blacked out. When Kael came to, the room was still. The device was dark, its glow gone. He sucked in air, touching his arm. The bite now just a faint scar. It's done? He rasped. Looking around, Tara and Lira slumped against the wall, blood and sweat streaking their faces. Dead council guards littered the floor, and distant engine noise signaled the rest had fled. You're alive, Tara said, voice hoarse. Good. I hate mopping up blood. Lira rushed over, helping him up. You okay? I thought you were gone. She hugged him, then pulled back fast. Sorry. Kael gave a weak laugh. It's fine. I don't feel it anymore. It's gone. He looked at Lira, her eyes clear and steady now. How about you? Lira blushed, shrugging. Normal. I mean, you're still cute. But not, cute. She grinned awkwardly, and Kael chuckled. The relief didn't last. Tara stood, clutching her leg. We gotta go, she said. Council's not done. I heard him mention a mothership. They'll be back. With what? Lira asked, pointing outside. Her ship was a smoldering wreck. They'd used it as bait to fend off the attack. Stellar drift, Kael said, straightening. It's intact. Let's roll. He supported Tara, and Lira led the way back through the swamp. As the stellar drift lifted off, Kael settled into the pilot's seat, eyeing the two women who'd saved him. Tara, battered but smirking. You owe me big. Kael, yeah, I'll pay in coffee, he replied, grinning. He turned to Lira, checking the nav. Thanks. Lira, for real. Lira glanced at him, smiling. No biggie, but don't get nabbed again. Okay? I'm not running all over the galaxy for you. She looked away, but Kael caught the pink in her cheeks. The ship soared into space, and Kael felt his body, light, normal. The parasite was gone, but then a faint signal beeped on the console, a life pod. Just like the one that started it all. No way, he muttered, switching it off. I'm done with bugs. Tara raised an eyebrow. You sure? Sure, Kael said, but a tiny doubt lingered. Valith had freed him, but the galaxy still held shadows waiting to stir. Chapter 8. Normal is a gift. Kael Voren never thought a rest stop near Earth could feel so breathtaking. After months of running, fighting, and slogging through stinking swamps, he stood at a massive window in Lunar Haven Station, gazing down at Earth's blue curve. Moonlight streamed through the glass, glinting off his freshly trimmed hair, now flecked with a touch of silver. He let out a slow breath, feeling a weight lift, like he'd shed an entire galaxy from his shoulders. You gonna stare at that forever or what? Tara Klyne's voice cut through, dry and familiar. She lounged on a bench nearby, boots propped on a table, cradling a steaming coffee. Her shoulder scar peeked out from her light armor, a reminder of Glacora. Thought you hated crowded places. Kael turned, shrugging. Not anymore, he said, walking over to sit across from her. No one's eyeing me like I'm dessert now. Feels good. He brushed his arm where the bite had faded to a barely there line. No more itching. No more heat. Tara smirked. Congrats on being a regular guy again. Don't expect me to clap. Though, you still owe me for all that trouble. Will coffee cover it? Kael grinned, sliding his cup toward her. Call it a goodbye gift. Tara grabbed it, took a sip, and winced. How do you make this so bitter? Fine, I'll take it. She stood, clapping his shoulder. I'm out. Got a lead on that life pod signal you mentioned. Someone's paying me to check it. If it's bugs again, I'm billing you. Kael laughed. Please don't. I'm done with bugs. He met her gaze, softening. Thanks, Tara. Really, without you, I'd be a council puppet by now. Tara shrugged, heading for the door. Don't get sappy. You're alive. That's enough. Catch you later. Kael, she waved, her tough silhouette vanishing into the crowd of pilots and tourists. Kael watched her go, a pang of emptiness hitting him. Tara wasn't the warm and fuzzy type, but she'd become a cornerstone of his wild ride. He was lost in thought when a familiar voice piped up. What's got you zoning out like that? He turned to see Lira Valtor standing there, in a simple silver pilot suit, her black hair tied up. She held 2 cups of fruit juice. Smiling, "Grabbed these from the kiosk. Less bitter than your coffee," she said, sitting down and sliding one over. "Thanks," Kael said, taking a sip. The cool sweetness woke him up. "You not going with Tara?" Lira shook her head. "Nah, I'm off for a few days. After Valith, I need a breather. Plus," she glanced at him, cheeks tinting pink, "wanted to see how you're holding up without a mob chasing you." Kael chuckled. "How am I? Normal, I guess. Boring. Probably. Not boring," Lira said, tilting her head. "You're still, interesting, even without the parasite." She blushed, looking away. "I mean, you've got good stories. I like hearing them." Kael studied her, a warm flutter stirring in his chest. "You don't feel it anymore, right?" he asked, voice quiet. "The thing in me?" Lira nodded, eyes brightening. "Nope. Since Valith, it's gone for good. I'm here 'cause I want to be, not 'cause I have to." She grinned, a little shy. "Sounds cheesy, but it's true." Kael smiled, the first time in months without guilt tagging along. "Glad to hear it," he said. "You don't know how relieved I am. I hated people having to fight just to talk to me." "Well, I'm done fighting," Lira replied, winking. "Now it's just you. Wanna walk around? They've got a cool floating garden here." "Sure," Kael said, standing. They left the lounge, strolling through Lunar Haven's bright corridors. The crowd ignored him. No starry stares. No whispers. He felt invisible, and it was perfect. The floating garden was a wide space with plants drifting in glass pods. Artificial sunlight mimicking day. Kael and Lira sat on a bench, watching leaves hover lazily. "What do you think about all this?" Lira asked, voice soft. "After everything?" Kael mulled it over, tapping the bench. "I used to think normal was dull," he said. "Now it's the best thing I've got. No one chasing me, no one losing their mind. I'm just me." Lira nodded, looking at him. "I like you like this," she said, then flushed. "I mean, you don't need to do anything wild to stand out. You're enough." Kael grinned, heart picking up pace. "Thanks, Lira. You too. Without you and Tara, I'd be toast." They sat quietly for a bit, soaking in the calm. Then Lira slid her hand onto his. "You ever worry it might come back?" she asked. Almost a whisper. "The parasite?" Kael glanced at his scar. "Faint as a ghost. Sometimes," he admitted, "but not now. If it does, I'll handle it. I'm not alone anymore." He squeezed her hand gently, smiling. Lira blushed but didn't pull away. "Good," she said, "'cause I'm not planning to ditch you." They got up, wandering the garden, chatting about simple stuff, ships, coffee, the time Lira nearly crashed into an asteroid because she dozed off. Kael laughed more than he thought possible. And for once, tomorrow didn't loom like a threat. Back in the lounge, Kael gazed out the window again. Earth glowed under the stars. And he thought of that lifepod signal Tara was chasing. "If it's bugs, I hope they steer clear of me," he mumbled. Lira overheard, laughing. "If they don't, I'll shoot him before they get close," she said, nudging him. "Now come on, let's eat. I'm starving." Kael nodded, following her. He wasn't the galaxy's lover anymore, just Kael. A regular pilot with friends, a life, and a fresh start. The rumors about him were fading. And he knew, whatever came next, he was ready. Normal, it turned out, was the greatest gift he'd ever gotten.